Hello, everybody. I am Lieutenant Sarge, and I'm going to be doing a discussion with some folks. We're going to be talking about Gamergate, and I want to go ahead and introduce everybody here. First up, I want to introduce Ali. Ali, you want to go ahead and say hi?
Hello there.
What is your full name?
I go by Aliana Cordova on Twitter.
Okay. Next up is an individual known as Shinjo. I believe that's how you say your name.
Yep.
All right, Shinjo. Do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Shin, and I am trying not to say something witty and funny to ruin the recording.
Very good. And next up is a man who goes by the name Nick Naylor. Nick,
So,
you want to introduce yourself real quick?
I promote Lucky Strikes on Twitter.
Very noble of you. And last off is we have an individual known as Lee. Lee, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey people, what's going on? Anyway, my name's Lee. I just pretty much do random stuff every now and then.
All right. So the topic of the day is Gamergate more harmful than good for the video game community and the community of people who play video games? And we're going to go ahead and start this off with a series of questions. And I think I'll go ahead and field the first one to Ali. With this question, is Gamergate more harmful than good? Ali, what do you think?
I personally would say that it's more good than anything, if purely due to the fact that in the end, we're trying to make sure that the journalists are accurately portraying gaming. We want to try and make sure they're not getting, favors from underneath the table to give more games coverage than others. So that way, in the long run, it will, give more games an equal opportunity to actually succeed versus, favors.
Shinjo, what do you think?
In the long run, mostly good, because, well, think about how bad games journalism has been in the past, 10 or so years. So yeah, it's pretty much been us getting fed up, gamers getting fed up with how game journalism is and the overall view of how people perceive the industry.
Real quick, can you give me an example of what people are fed up when it comes to games journalists?
Well, the constant view. What was it? The whole thing of how people are journalists being more concerned on whether a game is sexist or is portraying is not as inclusive as they feel it should be. That sort of overall mentality.
Okay. Nick, to you, do you think Gamergate is more harmful than good?
Well, I think in the long run, in the immediacy, I think it did its job. It's, slowly but surely changing games journalism. But if it continues on, I don't think it's going to be the well-intended movement that it started out.
So I want to make sure I'm clear. At the past or present, it's in your view more good than it is harmful. But if it continues on, then it could become more damaging.
Correct.
Okay. And we'll follow up on that question. A question about that in a second. Lee, what do you think? Do you think Gamergate is more harmful than good?
Actually, I don't think it's more harmful than good. Actually, my line of thinking more, it kind of more aligns with that with alleys actually.
Anything specific?
Anything was really nothing that hasn't already been said.
Okay. Now, I want to go ahead and field this to anyone who wants to step up. What do you think is the most positive thing that Gamergate has done?
In my opinion, it's just forced ethics disclosures. That's probably the biggest thing. Because, for me, I saw maybe like a long time ago that game journalism had started getting corrupt. Because, I mean, sites like IGN were getting noticeably more keen to showcase big games like Call of Duty versus actually, giving other, titles a try. That's just my viewpoint on that.
Anybody else have anything that they feel is the most positive thing Gamergate has contributed?
Sure. I will admit to having a bit of a soft spot for charity, and I do like the fact that so much money has been given to charity.
What do you guys think about the meetups with Gamergate and having like people kind of, I guess, sort of like get together in a large community that possibly might have felt a little isolated? Do you think that that's a Gamergate specific phenomenon, or is it just something that was able to be an addition of Gamergate?
It's the closest thing we'll have for a convention in a long time, that's for sure. But as it stands, the whole Gamergate meetup thing, being able to meet other people that are part of the movement, and seeing that we're not actually alone, does sort of give that a good morale boost overall.
Now, got a question. What do you think is something that Gamergate has done that is harmful? And this is anybody who wants to go ahead and take this one.
I mean, you did finally kill B.
It finally killed B?
Yeah.
Can you be more specific for just anybody listening?
4chan, B on random board 4chan.
You think that was something that Gamergate actually did, or was that more just a creator moot and that wanted to go for his own financial business practices?
Combination, but Gamergate certainly catalyzed that.
What do you think helped catalyze that?
Well, the fact that Moot felt the need to shut it down because he didn't want it to shut up B or B.
And it had nothing to do with someone trying to ask a favor to get it to where everything would just disappear and they'd be left alone.
I'm not going to touch that one. I'm just saying that the simplest way to put it is that Moot, for whatever reason, decided it was shitting up V and B, and that he didn't want any discussion of it. Now, whether or not he was doing someone a favor is a different question. But Ali, he did shut it down.
Ali, you had something you wanted to say?
I thought part of the catalyst was also when the suicides over what was on B happened.
What about that Lucky Strike? Does that have anything to do with it?
Suicides have happened on B for years.
I mean, the more recent ones seem to have caused Moot to start to act funny, you know what I mean?
I think another part of it that I've heard is also how he had to handle the shitstorm that was the fappening.
Well, he actually handled it fairly quickly. It was very stressful for him, as he said in his final hangout. But, with respect to the enormity of the legal challenges he was facing, he handled it pretty well.
So I got a question. I think the big thing was the the mass amount of community leaving 4chan due to Gamergate being censored on the forums. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that was the biggest factor in so many people leaving B and Pole, and certainly B.
Is everybody in an agreement that this is a negative thing that Gamergate caused?
I mean, yeah.
I wouldn't say it's really negative because Gamergate wasn't the main factor to do all that to 4chan.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, if I remember right, Poll for a while had that obnoxious trigger warning thing going on.
So there's a little disagreement on whether or not this actually in a negative that B kind of shut down, whether or not it was caused by Gamergate. What do you guys think of the new 8chan? Do you think that is a better site than 4chan had become?
Call it the promised land for a reason.
Okay.
Oh, I do believe the owner has said that he's not gonna fuck with people's right to say whatever the fuck they want to say.
Yeah,
as long as it's not illegal, he's okay with it.
So now, well, I guess before we move on to the next question, did anybody else have any negatives of Gamergate that they could kind of think of off the top of their head?
Not really. I never really saw Gamergate has done really anything honestly negative. Like, I mean, yeah, sure, people constantly call it a harassment movement, but I haven't really seen anything honestly negative come out of it.
Okay.
I will say this added caveat, it was a nice excuse to invade Twitter.
What about people who get harassed on either side due to the controversy that's kind of arose in these last few months? Would you say that is a negative thing that Gamergate should take the fall for, or is that just a natural consequence of controversies like this?
I'd say it's a natural consequence, honestly.
Yeah, that's something that's just plainly gonna happen. Like regardless. I mean, whenever there's something controversial, there's always going to be some someone's always going to be in harassed, especially if it's someone that's known. Right?
Well,
that.
Look at it from early on. Early on, everything happens. Anti-Gamergate is constantly saying every single thing that is harassing them, air quotes, is basically pro-Gamergate's fault when the evidence mostly points to it being third-party trolls. Then finally, more recently with the Gamergate and DC meetup, there was that bomb threat that was seen as a credible threat by the police, apparently. I don't know the exact story on everything, but the police did evacuate the building. They did do a search and everything. So they did what they followed their procedure. But once that happens, what does anti-Gamergate start saying? Oh, it must have been third-party trolls after the whole time saying that there's no such thing as third-party trolls. A little bit of made-up harassment or actual harassment that they received was pro-Gamergate. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing that bugs me. It's like a lot of what they say is just reeks of, double standards and hypocrisy, from what I've noticed.
Can you give me an example of what you think is like hypocrisy besides the bombing one?
Some of like the more SJW morals that a lot of them tend to espouse.
I'm just going to go flat out and say the best example of their hypocrisy is Anita Sarkeesian and her little trope thing. Trying to constantly say her whole message of trying to say that women have to stop being seen as damsels in distress, and then going and trying to play the damsel in distress.
What do you think, Ali? Do you think that's an example of hypocrisy?
Yes.
Is there anybody?
Because, they're like, oh, we got to be independent and strong. But then when they get criticized, it's like, oh, God, my Patreon. I'm being victimized. I'm being harassed. And it's like, really?
Is anybody in disagreement of that?
I doubt that, given that that's kind of like the biggest elephant in the room. I mean, it's not even it's an elephant that's not even trying to hide. It's holding up a sign. It's holding up a sign that's saying, "Hey, look, I'm here."
Okay.
I mean, there's more examples, mind you, but I'm just going to the top for my first example of it.
Here's a ready-made example. What Randy Harper did to Claire Schumann. Basically called her a slut, said that she didn't disagree with Gamergate in the orthodox way, and therefore was being cast out of social justice. Oh, and the infamous quote, "You made your bed, now you can sleep in it, you slut." We got slut-shaming, browbeating, all sorts of shit packaged in one ordeal.
Now, would you say that this... Oh, I'm sorry. Would you have something, Ali, you want to add?
The other thing that gets me about Randy Harper is, the whole SJW thing is all about fan acceptance, yet she can't seem to accept that she is.
I was going to say, showing that these people, whether it be feminists, SJWs, whatever you want to call them, or what they call themselves, showing that they will preach a high moral standard, but they can't live to their own standards, or they fall short of them in some way. Is that a Gamergate specific phenomenon, or is that something that you need Gamergate to show?
Yeah, I think it's more like you just need. I mean, I think with Gamergate, it just more exposed when people would just probably just turn a blind eye and ignore it, and now you just have people that are already more on the United Front that don't really care for that sort of thing.
It's not Gamergate specific, so it's just that we're the first people to really actually stand up and hold the mirror up to their actions or views or whatever you want to say it is.
Okay. Because I was going to lead into another question. Did you have something you wanted to add, Nick?
Yeah. This is the case with all fascists. Fascists, people who wind up in Orwell's sort of, upper echelons in 1984. They're fascists, but they're always cowards, and they're always hypocrites. And they're hypocrites in the worst way. And what it does is, it's a power play. They don't want to abide by the rules that they set out. They want everyone else to abide by those rules. But as soon as someone catches them in it, the first thing they do is, pity me. It's the plea to pity. And that's how they maintain their power over other people.
The next question I had that I was going to bring up kind of relates a little bit into what we were just talking about. It is, should Gamergate come to an end? And the addendum to that question is, what kind of criteria would need to be accomplished in order to end Gamergate? I don't want to address the second one just yet, because I think that could be something of its own. But the first one is sort of like a philosophical position. Do you guys think that Gamergate should come to an end? And I want to go ahead and start with Ali once again.
From what I've noticed, probably shouldn't, in a way, because it's almost like it's become, like, I think Oliver Campbell mentioned at one point, it's probably going to be like almost like a watchdog of sorts.
Okay, Nick, I know that you had earlier were talking about it will happen potentially if it were to continue on. So now I want to address a question to you. Should Gamergate come to an end?
Well, my opinion, it should come to an end for exactly the reason that Allie brought up, and that Oliver Campbell brought up, that people want to think of it as a watchdog group. That's what people wanted to think of Anonymous, which came out of the same place, 4chan. But look at Anonymous now. They're fueling race riots in Ferguson, Baltimore. What have you not? They're so depleted of, life of the mind and the original people that it's something entirely different than what it started out as. And it's unrecognizable.
Allie, you got something?
My only retort to that would be that I think that's more or less the nature of what Anonymous had become. Anonymous, was kind of like this internet hacktivist group where they would, basically come running in and they would give life hell to, individuals that were being generally unsavory. And I think the difference is that they kind of just seem to have run out of targets and they were getting bored. Whereas we can keep an eye on a group of individuals, these journalists, make sure they don't breach their ethics.
Well, what happens when you run out of journalists?
Do you think we'll run out of journalists, though?
There are a finite amount of journalists on the planet Earth.
Shinjo and Lee, do you guys have anything you want to add into this?
As for Gamergate ending, it more than likely won't, as long as things continue with the whole anti-saying it's all about harassment and constantly ignoring the ethics while it's just a which the harassment thing is just a smokescreen. Then it's not going to stop as long as that continues, and it'll eventually evolve beyond the whole game journalism thing, and it already has started to evolve beyond games journalism. We've ended up, there are people on our side that have ended up making more efforts to try and like Comic-Gate. Some people have tried to start that up and try to keep that going to try and get rid of the influence that the same sort of people have injected into comics. So, Gamergate, as the spirit of Gamergate won't end, mostly, so...
What about being derailed, especially if the initial adversaries, as Nick kind of mentioned, the journalists potentially running out, like a hypothetical, when your initial targets of criticism are sort of removed, is it something that Gamergate could become derailed in a negative way?
It was already derailed in a negative way to begin with.
Can you give an example?
The journalist using the harassment angle as a smokescreen, as I brought up earlier.
Okay. Lee, do you have anything you want to add to that?
As far as whether or not it ending, I don't really think it's going to end. It's like how it's become. I don't think it's really going to be ending anytime soon. I mean, it's like folks have already said. It'll probably be most likely just becoming the whole watchdog thing. But there are a finite amount of journalists. I don't think we're going to be running out of them. I mean, at least the ones that are the targets, unless they have some mass exodus or something like that. I think they're still going to be around for quite some time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure, our original targets may eventually run out, but at the same time, it's not like we can't keep vigilant and make sure that other journalists don't do something bad, or we could expand off of regular games journalism and try and work with journalism as a whole.
What kind of criteria would end it? If you were to say, pick a few things or a couple things, if Gamergate was to come to an end, and I want to fill this one to Nick, because I think he's the one who's most pressing concern of Gamergate continuing on and evolving into something. What would you say would be something that could help bring an end to Gamergate, if in a way that would be sort of meet the goals and what the Gamergate members want?
I think it would really require on a fundamental level that people be satisfied. And it, for all of its victories, and I'll admit, Gamergate has had plenty of victories so far, people don't seem to be content. Don't seem to be okay with, all right, we accomplished what we set out to do. And part of that is, new waves of people who change the groove bit by bit.
And another part of it, if I may add, is the fact that throughout all the victories, we've received no official acknowledgement, because that would completely destroy anti-Gamergate's whole narrative about it never being about ethics. And again, the smokescreen that they put up. So yeah, it would be them admitting that they were wrong about saying it's been nothing more than harassing women.
What about you, Allie? What do you think?
Well,
On the criteria
yeah.
of ending Gamergate.
Well, for one, I'd almost have to say, for one, social justice warriors would have to accept that, for one, here's the thing, they can't just change an industry the way they're trying to, for one. If they want to at least have acceptance for being in the industry, they have to drop the warrior part. And if they want, some sort of change in the industry, I'd say that they would have to actually start doing it more amicably. Try and make their own little niche in the market versus trying to forcibly change other people. That's probably one of the criterion that I would say would satiate Gamergate in a way, by them just stop going after people. And like has been mentioned, the other thing would be, acknowledgement that we're not a harassment group by any means. They would have to acknowledge that and admit that, and until then, I don't think it's really going to be dropped.
What about you, Lee? Any criteria you think would if met, could bring about the end of Gamergate in a way that satisfies the Gamergate community?
I mean, other than the criteria that have already been mentioned.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add?
I don't think it will. Not as far as criteria, but I do think that with SJWs, the whole, and I just kind of want to add to something that Ali mentioned with them making their own, chiming in their own stuff instead of forcing it on stuff that's already established, is also probably maybe like actually researching the stuff that kind of the stuff that they're talking about, and I mean like all of it, paying attention to it, like storylines and everything. Of course, that would involve work and something that they don't know how to do. So I mean, so I kind of doubt that's gonna happen anytime soon.
Now I got a question: is the people that are, I guess you could say, on the opposite side of the Gamergate community, you look at journalists like Kotaku, you look at people like Anita Sarkeesian, Brianna Wu, Jonathan McIntosh. They have very little to add to the discussion, yet they bring so much of the attention onto them. Does reacting to what they say cause more harm than good? If that makes sense? Or if when Zoe Quinn, who was one of the initial people that Gamergate talked about but then moved on, when she's no longer in the discussion that's being had, and so she tries to go and have a Boston Magazine article written about her, and people react to it within the Gamergate community, are we giving them attention when they shouldn't be giving attention, and does that do more harm than good?
Can I feel that?
Who wants to start us off first?
I just want to add something kind of quick on, at least on that, because I mean, personally, it's like it can, but I guess just through just my own lens. I mean, I think some of it I just find it more just hilarious, actually. The maybe because of the fact that I'm not the one going to going to like Twitter, going, oh my god, this person said this. Now I'm just the person like this, probably just sitting there laughing at it. Well, until they say, at least until they say something that's kind of messed up. But I mean but I don't really, but I don't see that. I don't see that too often though.
Right. I'm gonna go to Shinjo. I think he has something to say, and then I'll go to Ali from here.
I was going to say that it doesn't matter how much we ignore them or try to ignore them, because they'll just find a way to get the attention that they want. They'll make something up. They'll end up making something up and trying to use that as evidence to try and further their whole victim playbook. So
I honestly think it could go either way. I mean, yeah, sure, we're giving them ones that are probably less relevant and probably really do nothing for going against us any favors. Because, I mean, like Zoe Quinn. Zoe Quinn's been out of the picture for a while. She hasn't really even done much. But, yeah, she gets back in the limelight, and all of a sudden people are like, oh, see, look, we're trying to harass her. And I think that can be harmful because, she's not really important anymore. But she tries to make herself out to be.
What do you think, guys? Shinjo, Nick, or... Oh, actually, I'm sorry. Shinjo already got your opinion. Nick, what do you think?
Absolutely, it hurts the cause. Your reaction is the harassment that they report. It doesn't matter to them if it is actually harassment. It's the fact that you react at all. That's what they can report on. So if you don't flinch, if you don't react, period, if you carry on business as usual, they have nothing to use. So, yeah, I think if Gamergate wants to stop being stampeded by the likes of Jonathan McIntosh and Anita Sarkeesian, you really just have to underreact to the stupid shit that they say.
Now that's interesting because I just wanted to add one thing, and I'll give the floor to you, Shinjo. It's interesting that you say that, Nick, because I've heard the opposite from a couple of people. One of them was someone who is sort of a regular on this chat, who said that mocking the opposing side is one of the best things that can be done. And then also Gamergate celebrity Mr. Milo, I can't pronounce his last name.
Yiannopoulos.
Thank you very much. Has said that the amount of victories that Gamergate has achieved has often come through just simple humor and derision against the opponents. So it kind of goes in the opposite of kind of what you've said, which is you're not the first person I've heard say that either. Shinjo, you want to say something? Go ahead.
Well, first of all, the whole reiterating what I said before, if we do ignore them, no matter how much, they will do what they can to get that attention that they want.
Nick?
They have done what they want. They have made up claim. They have tried making up evidence of harassment when, as far as I do know, they weren't getting. As far as most of us do know, they weren't really getting harassed the way that they said they were. And second of all, the whole mocking their stupidity thing is more pointing out to the rest of the logical thinking, the rest of the world that actually has a brain, how stupid their points are.
What do you think, Nick?
I don't have a problem with mockery, but the reaction in the sense that everyone starts talking about it and debating it, and then, going onto their Twitter feeds and telling them that they're wrong. That kind of reaction, even though we all here agree that debate, dissent, that sort of thing is not harassment. That's exactly what they're looking for. Now, mockery, that's something else. I think Mikeru, the YouTuber, does a really good job of mocking the SJWs in the atheist world. He just continually mocks them off the face of the planet. But he doesn't go over to Free Thought blogs, for instance, and comment on everything that they say.
Ali or Lee, either one of you have anything you want to add?
Well, I mean, in a way, I can honestly see both sides of this, because first off, when you actively mock them, they sometimes will react in a way that will make them, look bad. But at the same time, we could be potentially giving them ammo for their narrative. I think a good fine balance would be kind of ignore them until they, get bored, and then they'll say something really stupid, and then maybe then they'll just make themselves look even worse. Because I mean, some of these people get desperate for attention. You know what I'm saying?
So in other words, they're like that. They're like that. That boss that just fucks itself up.
Pretty much.
Basically, they have a pseudo celebrity status and they want to keep it. So, like I pointed out, they'll make up evidence if there isn't evidence.
Well,
they just want to stay relevant.
In that case, they make up evidence. Just point out to whoever's investigating that.
I mean, well,
here's the evidence that they present, and make of it what you will. If your name isn't behind it, who's going to sort of indict you for it?
But you've seen how Sarkeesian in the past has shared really vaguely generic emails to prove her harassment. She has shared screen caps of really vague emails, or just flat out emails saying, "You're a stupid bitch who doesn't know what the fuck you're talking about." Or
don't you think that in the end that'll make her look worse? Because it becomes very obvious that she's trying to pull at straws to say that she's being harassed. That'll make a sane individual think, "Oh, what the hell is this? This isn't harassment. She's just trying to make herself look like she's a victim."
Well, if you want to know, the IP for the source of that email address that she ended up sharing the screen cap for,
I remember.
There were the fact that she didn't censor out the IP was rather an important point, because a few people I know actually tried tracing it to see it, like looking at the IP, and found out that the IP was directed to a website that was hosting one of the articles from one of the anti-Gamergate articles, and that there was something that was trying to track and log the IP of everybody that came to the site to see what the IP what was at the IP address. So that IP address was not censored out because it was meant to be sort of a honeypot situation to try and.
Oh, I didn't know they were doing that. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
I realized that. That's why I run ad block and blur on my browser the whole time.
Well, since a lot of people use Chrome, that actually might have helped out, because if I remember right, Chrome and Google and Chrome end up having software that kind of prevents that sort of stuff from going on, anonymous tracking of stuff or something like that. I can't remember, but I do remember what all
third-party
happened.
tracking.
Yeah, that. But I do remember how things went down with that, and I do remember quite well the conversation that I was having with some of my friends at the time that she shared that email screen cap. So yeah, that was very much a trap. That was her trying to find. She was using a generic, made-up email to try and garner attention, and for those that were smart enough to see through it, try to catch them.
So now, I want to bring this back into the main topic here. When you look at an example like that, and essentially they trap Gamergate members, or just individuals by luring them into a way of showing people's IP addresses. Would you say that is that's a behavior that Gamergate people or anybody who is critical of Anita Sarkeesian should avoid doing to not bolster their argument and claims, like not investigate what they say?
Well, people on the pro-GG side are already going to investigate it no matter what, because they're going to want to actually see if she's actually telling the truth for once.
So how would you avoid falling into traps like that? I guess let me broaden this real quick. Away from the honeypot Anita Sarkeesian trap, you have sometimes news feeds come out and people sort of react to it, and with that reaction can backfire if it's proven to be a false claim. And by people not doing investigations, the information isn't brought forth, right? So if you don't go in and try and figure out whether or not there's any truth to these claims, then I guess I'm trying to figure out a way to say it.
You don't verify the veracity.
Well, there's going to be people on our side that automatically react no matter what, but then there's also the people that do investigate and look into it before weighing in, and also spreading the info on what actually is going on through other sources, usually 8chan, or I don't even know if they can really do that much with Kotaku in action anymore, considering how Reddit keeps on trying to crack down on Gamergate stuff for KIA.
Yeah, I guess the big thing I was trying to make... Ali, you want something to say?
Well, I was just wanting to mention the whole trust but verify mantra.
Right. When you guys are talking about the IP situation, it kind of sounded like you need to avoid investigating sometimes because it can make it look like you're contributing more harm than good.
It's more that you shouldn't investigate unless you know what you're doing, unless you take the proper that sort of thing. Look, checking out the IP. Someone shouldn't do that unless they know what they're doing and take the preventative measures that you have to prevent from being tracked and stuff.
Okay, that makes sense.
Like maybe hiding behind a proxy or something, which honestly isn't a problem for me because my IP makes it look like I'm all the way 2 hours north.
You guys realize that an IP address will give you a geolocation, but not your actual, like, where you are at that instant. It'll just give you a city.
It won't. It'll give a general location, but it won't give your personal information out.
You have to subpoena the ISP for that. So
Yeah.
the trap was limited in the sense that, well, they got a bunch of information that a bunch of people in random cities across the United States and Europe went to this website.
We actually have a member of the chat who's going to be joining in, and I'm actually going to field a couple of these questions towards him because I think he has got some opinions that we were discussing earlier. So I think he's just now getting in. Let me just check and see if he's with us. Shrek, are you with us now? Hello, Shrek?
Shrek?
I think
No. There it is.
Okay. So we're talking about Gamergate and this discussion, and we were the main topic was, is Gamergate more harmful than good? and we were just kind of talking about the last question is reacting to anti-Gamergate notable people like Jonathan McIntosh, Zoe Quinn, more harmful than good? And I guess I can go ahead and give you the question to that, Shrek. But before we do that, you want to just introduce yourself to the chat?
Not much to really say. I'm generally referred to as Shrek Bane. Half ogre, half crashing the plane with no survivors.
So what is your opinion on reacting to anti-Gamergate folks? I gave an example when Zoe Quinn, she was kind of out of the discussion of Gamergate, which was kind of how a lot of Gamergate wants it to be. They don't really care about her too much, yet she goes and has a Boston Magazine article written about her, and she goes to Congress talking about this harassment narrative against women, and she tries to really put herself out there on the public scene. And obviously, Gamergate members will react to that with either mockery or some sort. Is that more harmful than good, or is that something that is perfectly fine? What would you say?
Well, there is a line to be crossed there. This is not a simple yes and no answer, right? Now, am I saying it is completely a bad thing to completely mention anything or anything that these people say? No. But at the same time, I do think we have a tendency to focus too much on our critics instead of, focusing on our actual active goals. Sometimes, this may be just my personal opinion, but looking at the hashtag, we expend way too much energy on discrediting our critics, on mocking our critics. If we only took half of that energy and shoved that into our actual, defined goals, we would be ahead much faster. Now, the question you ask is, is that more harmful? That depends on how it's done. And, a little mockery here and there is one thing, but if we're being too aggressive, that really doesn't help. Best example is last night.
So,
if you're not familiar with what happened is, some people started, flooding Neil Gaiman because he retweeted one of, I think, was it Randy Harper's tweets or something. Now, that is fucking idiotic. If you're gonna start, massively going after anybody who, just does a retweet or something, then that doesn't make any sense. The end result is, you've left, a public persona with a very bad impression of us. That does not help anybody.
Now,
doesn't really make any sense to me either, since he hasn't really made himself, he hasn't really made any sort of commentary on it at all, really, and all of the stuff that I've seen from him wouldn't suggest him, really aligning with the SJW mindset either.
So, Shrek, I wanted to ask the next question was just sort of the previous one, was should Gamergate end, and what kind of criteria would end it? You want to give your thoughts on each of those questions, and then we're going to proceed with sort of the last question of the topic.
Well, that entirely depends on your definition of Gamergate and how you see Gamergate for what it is and what its nature is. I personally say, in the way that I would like to see it continue, I don't think it should be ending. But that is not in the form of, this huge anonymous, I'm going to use that term very carefully, outrage machine. Because I have a tendency to fall into outrage just as much as our opposition. But more so in the sense,
I have
so. But more so in the sense
quickly.
that we will be
1 second, Nick. I'll let you go.
continuous reminder and way to raise awareness and make people keep an open, critical eye towards journalism, that I think is something that has value. It should be continuing. A reminder, so to speak.
All right, Nick, you have something you wanted to add in. Go ahead.
On what Shrek was saying, that's really what I was trying to get to. I was just not doing a good job of getting that across. What I really wanted to say was that if you don't flinch, if you don't react to these people, you come off as less of a hate machine. The other side of that is if people can collectively agree to not react so much and have more level-headed debate, when these people do cry harassment, all you have to say is, well, nobody we knew emailed them because stop talking to these people. And the cops or whoever can look into it, and lo and behold, they're making shit up yet again.
Now, Shrek, Nick actually had a point to make about Gamergate, whether it should end, and I wanted to have you address that since you kind of missed out on that part of the conversation. Nick, can you reiterate what was your thoughts about Gamergate if it doesn't end? What could be some negative consequences, just so Shrek can hear it, and then Shrek, you can comment after.
Earlier, Shrek, I made the analogy of Anonymous and what it has become. It was originally viewed with a lot of contempt and a lot of distrust and fear. And it began as a troll group from 4chan, but more and more people warmed up to it, and people wanted it to be a watchdog group. And it sort of became that as the people from 4chan fell away and the casuals fell away. And you were left with basically only new waves, and now we have exactly that watchdog group, only potentially quite dangerous in that they're now fueling race riots in the likes of Ferguson, Baltimore, etc. I'm not saying Gamergate would become that, and I can't really predict what would become of Gamergate, but in my opinion, watchdog groups don't end well, particularly watchdog groups that are anonymous. They're never organized, they don't have a leader. I think it's frankly a recipe for having your heart broken, essentially.
So, Shrek, what do you think? What would be your response to that? Since I already have I think the opinions of Shinjo, Lee, and Ali, you've all had a chance to kind of address that, if I recall correctly.
Well, once again, it depends on the form and the shape that this is going to take, right? The difficulty lies in the fact to not fall into that mindset of this whole call-out culture thing, because watchdog or not, there can be a difference. If GG was to end up being a general, as I said, reminder or a way to raise awareness, right, then I do think that there is a place for it. That being said, there are many different directions this thing can go. So it's really hard. Of course there are ways that this can go wrong. Absolutely, I agree on it. But the responsibility then falls to us to ensure that it does not go into that direction. And maybe at some time, the people that are now fighting the hardest are going to be the ones to oppose it. This might very well be a scenario that happens. But at this point in time, we don't know where it's headed.
I have a question, and
I have one thing to add there. Maybe it would be good to emphasize not letting yourself get burnt out, because sometimes burnout can be the biggest enemy of a movement. You know what I'm saying?
It usually is the kryptonite, actually. It's usually the kryptonite of the movement.
So I have a question, and this is kind of going back into a previous question. The reacting to the anti-Gamergate people. Myself, um, I would be lying if I said that I never reacted spontaneously or impulsively to any sort of stupid statement that a celebrity, whether they're involved with Gamergate or not, has done or said. And sometimes when you have a particular following of people that you are aligned with, it's very easy to mock and deride, but it's also a very human thing to do. And I think that and to search for good PR, which is sort of the question I'm leading up to, it's very easy to lose the PR battle by simply indulging in just what naturally humans will do, which is to kind of take humor in the arrogance or folly of people who are in positions of power or positions of prestige. Um, Now, this is getting into the PR thing. There are people in Gamergate that don't agree with some of what you guys have said. There's people that agree with some of what you guys have said. And so, what I want to know is, what do you guys think about the Gamergate PR war? Do you think that good public relations is something Gamergate should strive for, or is it something that should just be left alone and really just kind of keep on going on with like the entire mockery, making memes, and everything of that nature?
I don't think we're really going to get that good PR thing. The moment we kind of had like that, like especially that kind of bad PR from the main media, that was pretty much it. That was kind of the nail in the coffin for trying to get that. Because now at this point, it's kind of like the fact. The whole how that the whole shtick of it being, the movement being like a hate movement or something like that. That's gonna be like a really really hard stigma, almost to like get rid of, almost like damn near impossible. So it's more an old tactic as someone put it, where if you're losing. And I'm talking about like with the opposition with this. If you're losing that, like the argument, the argument you're having, switch it to another one. That you're either having and win it, or one where the mainstream media will most likely jump onto.
And Ali, what are your thoughts?
Well, the thing is, yeah, a movement like this is would be hard to get positive PR. That is true, and you do have mentalities of the memers that will make it more difficult because they think it's going to be fun to do. So yeah, it's going to be hard to control that because, as I said, we are a leaderless, decentralized movement. So yeah, it'll be hard, and sometimes it's probably nigh impossible to do. At the same time, we can't just completely ignore the public in general, because the moment we do, we're going to generate negative opinions. I'm thinking, how some of us like to go after like Seiwu or Butts and start calling them by mail and calling them by their old names, and to us we're just just shitting around, and we think, well, they don't respect us, why should we respect them? But at the same time, that gives the enemy ammunition against us, first off, and second off, just calling them by the name they want to be called by the gender they want to be called by, is just a general common courtesy that if we at least extend that, we make ourselves look better than they do. And it's not that hard to do, really.
Shrek, did you have anything you want to add to that?
Oh yeah. See, this is actually a topic very dear to my heart personally, and I know that I have a relatively controversial opinion here. I think we're framing this discussion, or this question is going to be phrased wrong when we're calling it PR, because there's a difference there between being concerned about PR and doing everything in our possible power to make us look as horrible as possible. I mean, there's nothing wrong with with shitposting. There's nothing wrong with memeing and everything. However, we do have a group of people who will go out of their way to destroy any sort of positive sentiment that GG is bringing about by aggressively, false flagging, making the most outrageous statements just to, because in their opinion, they're quote unquote, they're never gonna. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of I'm never gonna get a fair shot in the press, anyways. So let's be as crass and as offensive as humanly possible to anyone. That's not that's not an attitude you win any kind of fight with, because you're alienating potential allies, right? You're basically even if you were clean to begin with. Every time you reach into the shit bucket, you get more shit on you.
Shinjo, what do you think?
Well, considering the early on derailment by the journalists that gave us the bad PR in the first place, fuck the PR, keep with the ethics ideas and the principles. That's the simplest way I can put it.
Well,
just try and be the most ethical. Just try and stick with the original ideals of the movement that we're trying to keep it about ethics. There's nothing. I don't have anything wrong with how we've gone and given to charity and actually helped people and helped out people. There's nothing wrong with that. We're being good, but the best we can do is just try to stick to the ethics. Say fuck it about our PR, because there's nothing we can really do to stop it, because anti-Gamergate, there's quite a few of them that only care to say, well, you're nothing more than a hate movement, and just keep on with their narrative. So yeah, there's no reason for us to really try saying, hey, that's not us. Just ignore what they're saying, keep up with our principles, and keep mocking their bullshit. And
may I respond to that?
I suppose. Go ahead.
I think Allie had one thing she wanted to add in, but it kind of depends on which one of you guys wants to go first.
Well, there's a difference on being all concerned about the PR war, but that doesn't mean we should be sabotaging ourselves. There's a group of people who get really upset whenever somebody does something that they consider as PR, right? Just because we're sticking to our ethics doesn't mean, if somebody accuses you of thievery, do you then go out and steal things because, hey, people are accusing me of thievery anyways?
No, I'm not saying that sort of thing. I'm not saying, well, I'm already considered a misogynist. Why don't I just be a misogynist anyway? No, I'm saying.
Well, what you're trying to say is just don't actively worry about it.
Yeah, there's no changing what the media. There's not going to be any changing what the media says about us, because no matter how much good we do, the media still keeps on parroting the whole, it's a hate movement, despite all the good that is on the record of what has been done by people who are pro-GG, despite all the changes that have been made in the industry because of Gamergate, that they will not admit has happened. Despite everything that Gamergate has done good, and and all the goals that Gamergate has met so far that have not received any acknowledgement, they still continue on with the negative PR of Gamergate being a hate movement and nothing more.
Now, this is a very good question. Shrek or Ali, I'll facilitate this to you. With what Shinjo just said, when the media has not shown any signs of being receptive to either the arguments Gamergate members have brought forth, or to showing the positive effects that Gamergate has brought forth, and has always relied on the anti-Gamergate to put their side first and foremost for the majority. How do you win a PR battle in that case?
If you ever tried to create a PR battle in that case, you'd have to basically go out and show that we're not that bad. I mean, in a way, the whole GG and DC thing could be a good example of how their narrative is kind of backfiring on them. Because, Gamergate was just trying to, enjoy a time in DC, and someone calls a bomb threat on them. And all of a sudden, they're like, oh no, what are we going to do? Because stuff like that is hard to just simply cover up.
Shrek, what do you think?
Well, I think actually what she was saying in regard to GG and DC proves my point. This was not necessarily something that was planned as a PR event, okay? It's not that people were particularly concerned about PR when they were meeting there. Nevertheless, that meeting, the photos and videos that came from there, had made people admit that, yeah, these aren't just straight white males. They're actually a very diverse group. And this is what I'm trying to say here, basically, is being concerned. I'm not saying we shouldn't be concerned. We should be concerned with PR and worry about everything about PR. But at the same time, that doesn't mean we should be sabotaging ourselves. It used to be the case in the early days of GG that you could tell people, hey guys, do your own research. Just watch the hashtag, have a look at what people are saying, and people would convert eventually. Now we're at the point where there's partially so many people that are so busy with fighting any attempt of, in their perception, PR, that we it's becoming more and more difficult to do that. Once again, it's less about trying to shoot for PR. It's more about just being acting normally, not being complete and utter douchebags, right?
Just being decent people.
Yeah, being semi-decent people, and the problem is solves itself here. And I don't think it's a fair assessment to say, oh, the media is never going to give us a chance anyways. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you keep flinging shit at everybody, who's going to want to talk to the guy who has his hands covered in shit?
Shinjo, did you have anything you wanted to respond or add to that?
Well, before I bring up what I was going to bring, I was just going to point out to Shrek that they do tend to talk to the people that have shit on their hands right now anyway. But not on our side. I'm just talking about the other side. But anyway, I was going to bring up, aside from the Gamergate and DC thing, there was the incident in shortly, like a few weeks before Gamergate in DC with the honey badgers at the
Calgary
convention. Oh. Yeah, the Calgary Expo. They ended up getting harassed and run out of the expo, and eventually having the cops called on them just because they had Gamergate imagery at their little area in the con. So, yeah, that just kind of goes to show that they don't care so much of whether or not the people who are anti, that are the more extremists, don't care so much of whether or not the person is good or bad. They just care about attacking the imagery of Gamergate.
I have something to add to this whole thing.
Go ahead.
Public relations is a term that came into use after propaganda became a dirty word. So there's that as a general note. And the second thing is, these people use polite language and, political correctness to control and dominate public discussion. So, personally, in my opinion, I would go against all of that and say, with all vulgarity and crudeness that I wanted. But realistically, to be fair, as Shrek was saying, it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. I do think, however, that to a certain extent, though, you can't play by their rules. Sure, you should be polite and courteous when you're interviewed or you're talking to someone on the other side who's going to report whatever, but you shouldn't kowtow or play into their rules, because that's where you lose.
Now, what do you think about the fact that Gamergate is being held to a higher standard than the opposition of Gamergate, insofar as the way people who support Gamergate are held to a higher standard? Any type of act of negativity is considered harassment, but opponents of Gamergate can say the most horrid and mean-spirited things, and is considered fair and just because Gamergate is evil.
My question is, as far as the opposition, are they even like held to a standard at all? I kind of, because especially when they, to the point when they do things that involve like any people's livelihoods. I wonder if there was like if there's like if they have like do they even have a line at all?
No, because that if people would take notice of their negative actions that were quite out in the open, then that would break up their narrative, and they're trying to continue showing that the anti-side are victims and showing any evidence against that in the media would just crumble what they've been saying the whole time.
Which I find weird, because they don't even try to hide that stuff. They don't even hide it. They walk around with a sign of it, and they're pretty much like they're just proud of it.
The media ignores it.
I have a simple answer to why Gamergate is held to a higher moral standard, in a manner of speaking. It's because Gamergate is trying to hold other people to a higher moral standard. It's a logical reaction.
I almost wonder if it's possibly too the whole because the whole video game is seen as like the stigma that it has, like as being like a teenage male hobby, despite the fact that it's really not and kind of hasn't been, or actually for several years now anyway.
Shrek, what do you think? With the higher moral standard, and by that, just to clarify, that means that whenever a person who's anti-Gamergate says something, it's considered okay because Gamergate is a harassment movement.
I stand against that. No, it isn't. Here's the thing. That's an impression that we might have. But that doesn't necessarily reflect reality. You gotta remember that over time, we have won over quite a few people who originally may have been neutral, right? Or
like say Mark Kerr?
Against us, right? And this actually does include journalists. Best example is, for example, recently the SPJ ethics dude, the SPJ dude. Now, he's made a couple of really good points. I recommend definitely listening to the podcast he recently released. For the main point that it's, you gotta have a basic understanding how media works, right?
Now, well, I was going to say, the reason I bring it up that it's the case with Gamergate is you look at individuals like the Honey Badger Expo, or excuse me, the Calgary Expo with the Honey Badgers Brigade.
Right, let me address that, okay?
Go ahead.
I think the way that the whole Calgary Expo thing was handled wasn't really helping much. Because, let me tell you about something. There were a couple people who actually, talked to the organizers about this without, making a big fuss. And they actually, it turns out that these people had no idea what GG was. They just looked, media coverage, oh, hate group, okay. Now, the result of all of this didn't really make us look any better. Right? instead, we are once again we're falling into the exact same things that our opposition criticizes. We're criticizing about our opposition.
When you say the results of it, can you be more specific?
Well, has any real positive change occurred from this? Are they still banned? Yes.
Does anybody have a response to that?
The people that but the difference is now we have a whole bunch of Calgary Expo visitors, right? Who now are either blocking us because we were flooding the hashtag, or there were trolls posting Nazi propaganda there, God knows what, right? Now, quite frankly, the people who quietly spoke to the organizers and had a calm discussion with them, those people actually affected some change.
Now, does anybody
the outrage itself that only further helped to cement the preconceptions that were already there.
Okay. Does anybody have a response on that? Does anybody want to add?
Well, I mean, I can see what Trekman is trying to say, that the way we were footing the tag probably didn't help preconceptions initially. But at the same time, as the Honey Badgers released information, it started to become more clear that, yeah, they got kicked out because of the whole Gamergate thing. And that it's kind of like, well, okay then. You know what I'm saying? Because, I mean, they did, what was happening was, the Calgary Expo was trying to use an article from Mary Sue, of all places, as their official statement. And then they were saying, like, oh yeah, they were harassing a panel, but then the Honey Badgers released a full video of them talking to the panel, and it was a normal discussion, and they were actually agreeing with each other on some points.
It was actually pretty calm and everything. Even I think Monday Matt showed that. So I mean, which kind of counters the whole that really weird argument about them being, I think, what was it, belligerent or something like that, or
yeah.
Shrek, did you have anything else you want to add?
I would actually like to add something.
Okay, go ahead, Nick.
I want to take Shrek's position for an instant and say it was mishandled. What should have happened was allow it to come to light on its own, as opposed to flooding the hashtag. Allow the people who quietly talk to the organizers do their thing, and let their work come to light. Let the truth win out, basically. And it'll solve itself.
I can't agree with that, because in the end, like with what the Honey Badgers released, yeah, if that would have come out later on, that would have made a far... the way the reaction was handled... How do I explain this? Like, when it would come out, that people could have just been straight up went like, this is what happened, we're not very happy about it, what can we do? Versus having this bad preconception for when it does come out, and having people already have thought of it in a negative light, I guess you could say. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure if you're agreeing or disagreeing with me.
I'm agreeing with you in the sense that, yeah, it was mishandled. We probably could have waited to react while the Honey Badgers got their information put up on YouTube and everything.
So, Nick, I just want to clarify. Are you saying that it should have, organically been brought to life by just word of mouth and not had a giant signal boost? Is that what you're against? Or are you against the negativity that was attached to that signal boost?
I was trying to take Shrek's position and say, basically, don't flood the hashtag in outrage. Let the facts come to light first.
And Shrek, just to clarify, is that what your position is?
To a degree, yes. Let us not make the same mistake that these... one of the things that a lot of Gamergate despises, I think I can make that statement, right? And quite frankly, we are falling exactly into the outrage culture. We're jumping at shadows. We're getting upset over tiny little things every single time before things are actually out in the clear. Let us focus more. I think it's general mindset. I am of the opinion we should be more focused on positivity. In other words, focus on promoting the positive things instead of constantly always trying to point our finger at every little negative thing that we see. Because let's be honest here. Who would you rather hang out with? Somebody that's just fun to hang around with and does positive shit, or somebody who is always basically seeing the end of the world and the devil in everything that they see?
It's a good point.
Shinjo or Lee, either one of you guys have anything you want to add to this point? That sounds like a negative.
Yeah, really.
I just wish Calgary Expo had done more research.
Well, that's wishful thinking. That's reality as we'd like to see it, but not as it is.
Well, basically what I'm trying to say is Calgary Expo did kind of handle things a little poorly, and yes, we reacted poorly, but it still just goes to show that they're... like I said, the people at Calgary Expo should have looked more into it instead of just looking up the whole Mary Sue article and trying to say, "Hey, this is what we're going to do about it," and take a position that's based off of lies, or at least mostly lies, if you want to take into account.
You gotta also.
I like this.
Perspective. These are. Have you ever? I don't know if you've ever volunteered or run a convention before. It is massive chaos. Okay, especially when it's during the actual expo happening. I can pretty much assure you that the person who ran the Twitter did not really have a clue what was going on. Right? Well, now I do realize that I absolutely agree they mishandle things, but try to see it from this perspective. Okay, they are trying to run a convention, and suddenly there's tons and tons of complaints coming in about a specific, attendee, right? Now there comes a point where, you have to react. Do I think that the whole police thing was completely out of line? Absolutely, and there was a lot of things there that were out of line, but nevertheless, we got to be very careful not to speculate always on intention. I'm going to go here with the old Hanlon's razor, or Hanlon's law. 90% of the time, as they say, well, how is that? It is much more likely that
I know
to incompetence than to malice.
Yeah, don't attribute what you can attribute to.
Don't attribute to malice
misfortune.
for what you could attribute to stupidity.
Yes, and that's pretty much what it boils down to, or incompetence, because in this particular case, these are probably people that were overworked, on little sleep, trying to organize a massive convention, which is always a near Herculean task, right? And they were confronted with a problem that warranted immediate solving. Now, did they handle it as best as they possibly could have? Probably not. But at the same time, there were a lot of... I was present during this, and there were a lot of absolutely vile accusations going around, and that didn't help the way things were going, right?
Now, Shrek, I think Ali and Lee both have a point that they wanted to bring up, so I'll let you finish real quick, Shrek, and we'll go to Ali first, and then Lee. Shrek, you want to just go ahead and wrap up what you're saying?
I'm done.
Okay, you're good. Ali, I think you had something you wanted to say, and then we're going to go to Lee.
It makes me think of a little thing that I've learned in my relationship with Amy, funny enough, is that a lot of nasty disagreements tend to come from both parties having misinterpreted something or be misinformed about something. Like, I remember not too long ago on Twitter, I think it was Mark Kern and Remington Wild both had started getting a little scuffle, and I noticed that the scuffle was a miscommunication. Remington Wild was not exactly getting, Mark Kern's point correctly. It was partly because Mark Kern was probably not explaining it right well. And it was starting to cause a bit of a kerfluffle, and communication was getting worse and worse, and it was about to start becoming a shouting argument. And I was just like, well, here. All he was saying was it was just wanting freedom of choice here. And then, Remington was like, oh, that's all he was trying to say. And I'm like, yeah, if one person wants to have the content filter on, the other person wants it off, so be it. That's all he was trying to say. Give the user the freedom of choice. And they were like, oh, I can agree with that. And they went on their merry ways.
Lee, the floor is yours.
Well, okay, since I was mentioning that the expo staff, being overworked and probably handling it as best they could. Personally, I don't really think they handled it as best they could, since this was a group that actually had a booth, so it kind of meant that the expo had to have known ahead of time. So they probably had like plenty of time to already do the research and look up like what the group is, and what they do, and someone on staff probably had to have been watching that exchange. So I don't really. A lot of things probably. It could have would have been all well and good had they not straight up booted them or anything like that, because now it puts that expo at a really negative light now. It probably gives them a black eye that they very well may or may not heal from. That's pretty much what I'm thinking. I don't really. Look, I've been to cons. I get people can be overworked, but I don't work. But if they didn't really, my main point is really they should have already kind of known who they were anyway, and things like that. I don't think really. Mainly, I don't really think that how they handle. If they handle it bad, I don't think it's more like a probably not. I think it's more like a hell fucking no, really.
I don't know about that, because don't you normally have to pay to get a booth at a con?
That I don't know. I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know how that works.
Yes.
Because here's my point. Maybe
from the con that I did volunteer for back when I was still in high school, so long ass time ago. Yes, they do have to pay for their booth for the space that they have for their booth. And
that's where my point lies.
I will agree with Shrek. They can be working staff for them. It can be rather chaotic. I worked in the basically what ended up being reclassified as the HR department for the con, being basically everyone's little gopher and bitch. So if extra people were needed, it was our the department of the con that I was working with that got sent to fill that gap and help out. So I can attest to what Shrek had said about how they can be chaotic and all that. So
Now
it still doesn't excuse them for doing they could have had one or two people go and look into what was going on with Gamergate.
Absolutely. But we also got to be honest here. A lot of facts were misrepresented too. For example, the booth didn't cost $10,000. As a matter of fact, it was always stated like it was, but a large amount of that was travel expenses on their behalf. That's not exactly something you can hold the con accountable for one. Number two, something that very few people seem to aware of, from what I hear, right? I don't have enough official confirmation from this, but from what I hear is they never asked for a refund.
Well, my other thing is, beforehand, for one thing, outside of, AGG and the internet, Gamergate is not super well known from what I've noticed. You know what I'm saying? It's like I've walked around Des Moines and nobody's ever really cared about me having a Gamergate shirt on. Nobody cared, and I think that's part of my point. And then there's also the fact that you have to pay for space. So at the time, what do you think that Calgary Expo is more concerned about? Oh, look, they're going to take a spot. They're going to give us some money for that. They don't seem to really have anything against them, so what's the harm? And then they start getting these complaints about Gamergate, and then they're like, oh shit, what do we do?
I have a question.
Go for it.
Are we talking about a deposit, or are we talking about, and was the deposit non-refundable as part of the contract? Because that's a different question.
Well, it would have been the deposit would have probably been well in advance, a few months in advance, and I wouldn't really know whether or not to say it is non-refundable because again, it's been well over 10, 11 years since I was at the con that I worked staff for, so. Yeah.
Well, in terms of the deposit, then it would depend on, or the money, the refund. It would depend on the kind of contract that they signed, as well as Canadian law.
Now,
the truth is, they never asked for one.
I have something I wanted to go ahead and say. It kind of revolves a little bit about Calgary, but it's just an overall thing. We can use Calgary for an example. You have an incident that occurs, and it seems that quite a few of you have said that the negative reaction that Gamergate had to that did more harm than good. It seems to be that was kind of the general consensus. And the way that the hashtag on Twitter was used for Calgary Expo, sort of bringing a negative light to Gamergate. But is it not true that that sort of reaction helped also signal boost or bring attention to Calgary Expo that might not have been given without that sort of vitriolic reaction?
I disagree.
I guess yes, maybe.
It sped it up for sure, but they have a YouTube channel with a large following, and that following bleeds over into Twitter. I mean, it was unavoidable. But the reaction itself, the level of vitriol, like Shrek was saying, didn't help anyone. People were going to react no matter what because of, their following number. They do have a massive amount of followers on and off. And they have an easy platform in which to get that message across. YouTube and Twitter. There was going to be a reaction no matter what, but it wasn't measured. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It was not contained.
The reason I say this is you look at a lot of things that have happened within Gamergate, and you look at sort of the reactions that have happened. Whenever there is something that collectively has, so to say, infuriated the Gamergate members or gamer members, it helps bring that issue to the forefront. I think a lot faster and on a larger base than issues that are just sort of being discussed at a more moderate level of discussion. And this is not a very Gamergate exclusive sort of reaction. This is something that you can see all throughout, I think, political history. At least within the United States, I can see that where you have anytime something that causes a lot of conflict within people. Whenever you see a community get outraged and really speak about how angry they are, is that not a way to really show at a large, to really reach a very large audience and really get the message out there about what is going on that has essentially been negative towards the community, or what has gone wrong that has affected this community?
That same exact argument has been made about the Ferguson riots, the Baltimore riots, it doesn't change the fact that rioting is not helpful.
Well, we're not talking so much rioting, but we could say protest. I mean, there is a difference between a protest and a riot, is there not?
There is a difference, but my point is the same line of reasoning that, well, the negative reaction, the bad reaction helps speeds it up and brings it to the forefront, that there's something bothering a community. The same thing has been argued of Baltimore riots, of St. Louis riots, but it doesn't change the fact that the reaction was not measured. It wasn't the appropriate reaction.
And the reason I say this is because I've seen the phrase outrage machine thrown around, I think, a couple times. I know, Shrek, you've mentioned it, and it's a very good analogy, and it's something that I think feminists and SJWs, as often they're called, people on the political opposite side of Gamergate will sometimes get accused of. Same with the Republican religious right. They'll be accused of being caused an outrage machine. But the reason I think that it's something to at least take note of is there is a measure of success that can be attributed to outrage being a way to spread a message out, and that's why I'm wanting to see what your guys' opinion on it, because when you look at Gamergate, the very origins of it was not necessarily civil that was being discussed, and the more that the pushback happened to gamers and to the Gamergate community as it was before it was so coined, there was definitely a growing, I guess you'd say almost like a fire that sort of rose. It was a very kind of like a Baltimore Ferguson riot that sort of emerged, or protest.
Hold on, I disagree with that.
Okay.
I have the first thread from B about Gamergate, or the conspiracy. Half of the post, I have it archived on my computer. Half of the posts are arguing, don't go after Zoe Quinn, you're just playing exactly into their hands. Don't screw with them. Talk about the improprieties that Internet Aristocrat was talking about. Half of the posts in a B thread were arguing for civility.
And that on a chat board.
Yeah.
Now, see, here's the difference. There's a difference between a protest and a riot, and I did absolutely agree on this. But here, look at it from this way. We have the power to make any hashtag trend. We've proven this, correct?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Now, instead of putting up somebody else's hashtag, nothing stops us from starting our own hashtag. For example, it would be, Calgary problems or Calgary exclusion or something like that. But instead, we decided to go, it became one of those, we're going to take over their hashtags. You see, this is the problem. We tend to jump too quickly into it's the opposition, therefore we're going to take their shit over thing. And while that might be tremendously satisfying in that moment for the people that are involved, in the end, it is railroading our goals. To bring the protest analogy, is who are you going to listen to? Are you going to listen to the guy that, makes their case, politely and, is explaining why shit is wrong? Are you listening to the screaming guys that are sitting in front of your driveway and not going to let you drive your car out to work?
See, and this is the reason I try and bring up the protest analogy. I mean, you look at protests during the 60s and 70s in American history. You have in the 50s, the civil rights issues. There's often the analogy within the X-Men comics that the characters Professor X and Magneto are allusions to the real-life civil rights activists Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X, and both of them had very two different ways of approaching dealing with fixing the problems within society amongst the African American community, right? You have the sort of, I guess you could say, protest versus militant activist approach. And I think that Gamergate has sort of that own little political division amongst the following, and that's what I was trying to get at with the anger. It's not so much that, as you said, Nick, I believe you said that within that Chan post, people were saying don't attack Zoe particularly, right? But you still have people who are kind of furious at what has just transpired, and they want to make awareness, right?
I didn't say the other half were attack Zoe Quinn. I only said half of them were arguing for attack the issue. The other half was comprised of jokes, shitposting, and a few calls to invasion. But the majority, which constituted about half of the thread, argued for civility. It was not a, oh my god, she's a whore attacker. It was, well, there's an issue here. Let's go get it.
So then, this is something I think Shrek, Shrek, I'm going to let you lead in on this. This is something I know you have said, so I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor here. You have said that you should make the issue not a personal attack, but you should be the opposition of the ideas and not the person. Is that correct?
Yes, precisely, because that is really how in my personal opinion, we should be approaching these things. You know, once again, I'm going to bring up this example that happened, yesterday over this, feminist Kickstarter deck. People were shitting over Neil Gaiman's mentions. This is a man who has an enormous following of several millions of people. And you know what? Most of the, comments that were made at him consisted of personal attacks on people. That is what turned the man off, right? When everybody else is getting muted and I'm getting a thank you from the guy, that then shows me that obviously my approach is working, right? So, you just as an example, instead of, going to this guy and saying, hey, Randy Harper is a total hypocrite, here, look at all the bad shit she's done, right? That's not really the way to go about this.
Now,
Randy Harper is a different argument, but
it's just an example here. It's just an example here. It's focusing on the issue versus focusing on individuals. People weren't mad with the idea of having this particular thing. People were mad at the people that were chosen for this. People were mad that he retweeted one of Randy Harper's tweets. But the idiocy is in this by, immediately using this as a cause to, go after a person. And, try to see it, how does this look from somebody's perspective, They're trying to do something positive, and all of a sudden they get hundreds of people in their mentions saying, this person's a horrible person, they're a hypocrite. That's not going to make people be wanting to listen much.
Nick, what were you had a point you wanted to bring up?
I was just going to say, Randy Harper is a different story, and I think should be dealt with differently, but I was going to leave it at that. And that's what I was trying to say. I wasn't going to argue the point about...
As an example.
I wasn't going to argue the point about Randy Harper specifically. I just wanted to point out that she's a different animal.
Okay. Gotcha.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not talking about her as a person at all. My point that I'm trying to make is if we, for example, look at our message, okay, the message that we actually have is, there is some shady shit going on in the media, and that is something we stand against, right? Now, that message, nobody has, technically speaking, a problem with. That is the message that if we write that on our banner and pursue it, most everybody would be on board with it. However, when it then turns into personal attacks, that's when people get turned off. Criticize actions, not people, right? Criticize call-out culture all you want. Criticize, shady practices, advertisement deals. you know, specific how do they call it, embargoes that are individual for different depending on how the outlet writes favorably. Criticize the practice of sending entire laptops to people brand new that the reviewer gets to keep those things. That people will have a much harder leg to stand arguing about it. But when you get to the point where you then individually target people, then that makes it much more difficult, and you really, really have to build an excellent case and present it well. Otherwise, you're just going to be seen as a hate machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Lee or Allie?
As I
Go ahead,
would
Allie.
say, I'd say that balancing how you react to things is very important. Like with the Calgary Expo, yeah, sure. In the end, it may have been a good idea to maybe get some attention to it initially, but at the same time, we overdid the reaction. You know what I'm saying? It's a balancing act.
Can you give me an example of a way that was overdone, just real quick?
Like has been mentioned, flooding their tag. Like, instead of just flooding it with, oh my god, look how bad this is, and, making all these pictures and everything, you could have used that tag with a few posts here and there, and maybe showcasing our own, and that's it.
Now, this is a real quick discussion on, because Twitter is sort of a unique beast of its own, in the way that it's utilized. When you talk about flooding the Calgary Expo tag, you're talking like the hashtag, right? Not actually the @Calgary Expo itself. So,
well, at the same time, flooding their mentions probably would not have been a very good thing either.
Okay.
I mean, people tend to get really annoyed when their mentions are flooded, and if depending on the mindset, they may write it off as, "Oh yeah, look at this. They're pretty much piling on us right now."
So you see the Calgary Expo tag. Let's just say that it was sabotaged or redirected by Gamergate. Let's just say that's what it was. Would people who then use the Gamergate tag in a way to attack Gamergate, would that be no better, and shouldn't they be called out for doing actions like that?
No, because you want them attacking the tag directly.
There's a difference here, okay? Look at the differences in what kind of tag is it. For example, I don't think I would have anything negative to say about us hijacking a Stop Gamergate tag, or one of the many hashtags that the antis have kept alive for a day or two. Okay. However, it is different if you look at things like GDC, for example. That's another good example, right? People were treating GDC the same way as an anti-GG hashtag. The result was that a lot of developers get a really negative impression, and a lot put us on put on the autoblog just for that, right? Because they were, they couldn't actually get the information that they wanted to because the tag was being flooded like crazy. And volume is not always the best thing, because there's a saturation point here. Okay, if they would have been more occasionally one or two people posting some well collected information in the hashtag, I don't think anyone would have had a problem. But when you get to the point where you're taking over the hashtag and completely flooding it, it works for an anti-GG hashtag, because then people are going to say, well, nobody's going to want to look at that, right? But if we're actually trying to get people's attention to look at our issues, flooding the hashtags of an existing, established thing is not the way to go about it.
So Shrek, just to clarify, you're saying that when it's a Gamergate directly opposed to Gamergate tag, such as Stop Gamergate, that it's okay at that point to sort of use it in opposing ways or mockery, but when it's a tag that is irrelevant to the Gamergate discussion, then it's not something that should be used to attack people who are against Gamergate.
It makes it seem like a very destructive thing to do. Now, for stuff, I'm not even saying it's okay for a Gamergate hashtag, right? It's still, you could still argue that that's not a cool thing to do, but at the same time, you could argue that there is no damage being done. Because the people posting on the Stop Gamergate hashtag already had their minds completely made up. However, once again, in cases like this, you're not actually in a debate of any sort, or even an exchange online. You're not arguing to convince the person you're debating with. You're arguing to convince the audience, the onlookers, right?
Now, that's a good point that you brought up, because wouldn't using the Calgary Expo or other tags like the GGDC, wouldn't that be a way to reach the neutrals or people who are less familiar with the Gamergate movement?
Well, yes, but at the same time, there comes a point where this turns over. As I said, a couple of posts here and there, some well put together information. Great, that does raise awareness. But when it gets to the point where it's nothing but that, that's when people get turned off.
Yeah, I would agree there. Like I said before, you need to find a balance with some of this kind of stuff, because if you try and you could probably, I know I'm about Harnett, so this is probably an analogy I probably only think of out of this group, but it's kind of like if you're, like, say, driving a car fast. You try and take a turn too fast, what are you going to do? You're going to go wide and you're going to crash. You take it just right and give the right pace, and you go through it nice and easy. You got to find a balance, because if you try too hard, in some cases, you're just going to go way off and go into the wall, and you're going to just crash and burn.
Mm-hmm. Or to make a different allegory here, you're not going to sympathize with somebody who actually makes your life more difficult, right? If somebody has a problem and approaches you, about it civilly and says, "Dude, this is really fucking with me, this is a problem," that's one thing. But when then that person has no problem making problems for you by blocking the road, by sitting around screaming at people, then you're not going to take them very seriously, because you're saying, well, these people have no concern for my problems, why should I have any for theirs?
Lee or Nick, either of you guys have anything you want to add?
It's kind of as I just typed in that chat. Pretty much, like Ali and Shrek already pretty much say what I would have said like earlier on. So I don't really have much of a take here.
Nick, do you have anything, Ned?
Frankly, I do agree with what Shrek is saying, although I think my main point of disagreement would be a little more implicit, where you draw the line in the sand, but what's appropriate. But that is a separate conversation, and a conversation to be had really in the thick of it, as opposed to right now.
Okay. So they're really the last one that I wanted to bring into this topic. And we've kind of already talked about it in small ways here and there, but I'll go ahead and, since this last conversation that has been discussed, it kind of ties into it. Are there ways of resolving conflicts within Gamergate and that Gamergate is trying to focus on? Shrek, you want to go ahead and start us off?
You might have to elaborate that a little bit better.
With resolving conflicts, either within Gamergate, the movement itself, or resolving conflicts that Gamergate is focused on. Calgary Expo could be an example, but I think it more to do with the problems with the ethics issues that are frequently brought up. Ways of resolving it that can actually meet the goals of what the proponents of Gamergate want, versus just constantly attack without resolving or getting any sort of conclusion to the controversies, if that makes sense. Is it still not something that, am I not phrasing it correctly?
The solution, I believe, lies in, well, as far as the infighting is concerned, I think we need to get away from the tendency of, even call out bullshit within ourselves. It is completely fair and valid to criticize each other, and I do not want this to end. I do personally believe that we are actually not putting enough scrutiny on our own, for lack of a word, members or, proponents, as we are putting on the outside. And I think it would go a great way to establish credibility, for example, if we were just as willing to call out the unethical practice of people that are, sympathizing with us as are not. This is a big issue that I have is, I'm just going to drop some, things that people might not agree with. For example, I think that we should be just as vocal in denouncing unethical practices when they come from, say, Milo Yiannopoulos or others. As a good example, right? We are constantly complaining about shoehorning politics stuff into games and so forth, right? Mm-hmm. We are complaining about censorship of games and, making an outcry to developers to change something because we are offended, correct? Well, yeah.
Is that something that you guys are?
Milo did exactly those things in regards to, I believe, was it a Battlefield game or something along those lines? Like being offended at some, that there were references made that could be interpreted as the Tea Party, and campaigned to have these removed. While, whether or not you agree with this or not is a different story, but the fact of the matter is, the behavior was exactly the same behavior that we criticize our opposition for. This is something that we should address, right? That is part one. Part two is we need to, work on creating understanding and dialogue. And I do not think that the appropriate way to deal with things is that if somebody does something you disagree with, that you then immediately try to throw that person under the bus, as I've seen many times happen in GG, and start, the personal drama about, oh, this person is a bad Gamergate or something, shit like that. It once again boils down to the, criticizes, focus more on actions instead of people, right? If instead of, targeting individuals that we disagree with, just state that we have a problem with the tendency that we see, people are going to respond to this much more favorably. And also, looking at it, if somebody, from the inside, is looking at it, then they're much less likely to dismiss it just as another nonsensical drama thought.
I think that Ali, would be a very good thing, because honestly, here's another thing that I like to say is that introspection is a very important thing. That, Gamergate could use just as much criticism as our detractors, because, and even the individuals within Gamergate could technically use some of their own personal criticisms, because in order to make a better movement, we need better people that, have better outlooks and, how am I going to say this? Just people, knowing maybe that what they're doing is, mistreating individuals. Like, say someone's mistreating individuals, we need to let them know that, because if they have no understanding of that, what are they going to fix?
Nick,
what are we going to fix?
Nick, I think you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah. I already talked a lot, so I'll try to keep this bit brief. I like what Shrek said about enough with the call-out culture. It's the phrase call-out just makes me sick. It's overused and abused. One of the things that really set me off about Gamergate in January was the fact that, well, when I lost my Twitter, very few people tried to help me get it back. Didn't have my voice on Twitter, and I'd been called out for, by Gamergaters for arguing with people about different topics unrelated to Gamergate. And I hated that. I could not stand the fact that I was being called out as a harasser simply for arguing with someone. I don't want to get into specific examples because that gets tricky with the fine details. I don't have my account anymore, but I am sick and tired of the call-out culture.
Can you? I think you kind of described it, but can you just clarify what call-out culture is for me, Nick?
Call-out culture is basically sort of this over-exaggerated personal confrontation in which you say, XYZ, you are doing ABC crime or offense or whatever. I call thee out. It's ridiculous. It's a way of, painting a red letter on someone for a perceived slight.
Yeah. A good example is if you're in a discussion with somebody, right? And then you include multiple hashtags and dot replies to make everybody aware. Oh, look at this guy.
Hell, what I got called out for had nothing to do with Gamergate. It had to do with this one person who happens to be a vocal critic of Gamergate, Annie K, but I was arguing with her about something different, and she told me to untag her, but refused to do the same for me. And my refusal to untag her, if she refused to untag me, got me called out, and it was fucking ridiculous. I mocked the guy off of Twitter.
So just to clarify, call-out culture is sort of a Twitter thing where you basically bring people in using the Twitter hashtag or people's dot links to bring them into a conversation that you're having?
That's a mechanism of call-out culture.
Okay.
That is how call-out culture functions on Twitter, but call-out culture is much more generic thing. Call-out culture would be, for example, if you're a journalist and you write this article, like, everybody look at this guy, how horrible they are. It is basically, for the lack of a better term, public shaming because something somebody does offends you, to drag them out into the spotlight and, like shine a light on them so that everybody can see how bad they are. That is call-out culture.
And what's pathetic about call-out culture is that it's Twitter. For God's sakes, mute someone if you feel like they're bothering you. It's ridiculous. Fucking ridiculous to me.
Now,
that you
ahead.
could be called a harasser for CCing someone.
Now, I want to address this point because I know a couple people within this little chat community have called out a couple Gamergate people who I guess act less. They're a little bit more unsavory in their way that they act, and one of the people is supposedly a military person and was called out by one of our community members within this chat. So, would that be a part of call-out culture? Would that be an example?
No.
I would argue.
No.
Okay.
Because there's a difference between having an opinion and having that opinion in a personal discussion, right? And basically going out trying to get as many people as possible to be aware of it and attack that person. There's a difference there. It's about how it's being done. Same thing again. I can talk. If I have a bad opinion about you, for example, I'm perfectly free to talk shit about you in my personal groups, or utter that opinion. When I'm sitting somewhere having a burger, talking with friends, I can say, "Hey, that guy's a really shitty person," right? However, when I go to a big conference and go out on stage and go basically like, "This guy's a really shitty person, and everybody should tell them that they're a really shitty person," that's call-out culture.
So could the difference be Like, one, which isn't call-out culture, is bringing to light something they've done, and the other would be just calling them a generally shitty person.
So
it can also be the scope of it, too.
It's more about the scope. It's not so much about what's been done. It's about how you go about discussing it and whether, how you deal with bringing it to light. If you have a criticism, about somebody, and that's one thing, but when you purposely try to, as I said, drag them into the spotlight so everybody can see them, whether or not they want it or not, when you purposely include people into the conversation that would normally not be part of that conversation, just to, make everybody see how bad of a person or how bad this particular thing is, that is call out, because you are basically trying to broadcast this to as big of an audience, not for people to see it, but for everybody to publicly shun that person.
Now, I have a question on that, because...
I just want to add, kind of like what has been happening with, what was his name? From the guy who played the father on Seventh Heaven. And then Steve Collins or whatever. And then shortly after that, the whole debacle of the Bill Cosby thing. Those things were taken way out of proportion, especially when you consider what has happened with other people like, say, Lena Dunham.
Oh, yeah.
I guess I'm still kind of confused on where you draw the line on some of this. And I'm going to give you an example. If you have Jonathan McIntosh going in and saying whatever stupid thing of the day he feels like saying, and then people tag him on hashtag full Macintosh and take the clip of what he said and you put that under the tag, is that not a form of call-out culture?
It is.
That rings right.
It depends on how it's being done. For example, if you tag him personally into it, I think that is bad form.
Most of what I've seen has been what?
Can you mark his statement? Absolutely. But when the goal is to make as many people as possible to dogpile that person and to make them basically feel powerless due to the sheer onslaught as opposed to the argument that is being made, that's the difference. Right?
Most of what I've seen against Macintosh has been people sharing his very stupid tweets, like screen caps, not directly tagging him in the conversation, just using full Macintosh and sharing a screen cap of his idiocy. That ranks pretty much right up there with to me with the whole Florida man meme. It's not call out culture so much as it is pointing out someone's stupidity.
So pretty much, in other words, it's not really. It's basically, it's not really call out culture when they do it kind of do it themselves, and we're just saying, it's already there. The person already did put it out there themselves, and it's just themselves. They're saying
they publicly said something stupid.
It's like
we're sharing it to laugh at, and we're not okay. They already said it. It's out there. We're just sharing it with people to laugh at, and that's pretty much what the whole idea of full Macintosh is. It's not to character assassinate Macintosh so much as it is to point out how much of a dumbass he is.
Yeah.
Lee, did you have something else you wanted to add on that?
Well, no, it's more of, I think, the fact that basically, I think what folks are saying is that, since the whole call out culture is more, I think, of a public shaming thing, is the fact that it's not necessarily that when the actual person's already done the majority of the work themselves, and nobody else has done. No one else changed them or anything. They just said that they said something dumb. So they already did the work, and people are just and Snake put it. They already put a screen cap and did the screen cap, and that's it.
Just simplify it once again. Think of a party, okay? Somebody's acting like a jackass, right? Now, if if you tell the guy, dude, you're being a jackass, stop that behavior, that's one thing. But when you're going, hey, everybody, look at this guy, look at what a jackass he is, that's called
All right. Well, I'll have to look further into this. This is the first time I've ever heard the term cult culture, and I've been trying to just figure this out myself while listening, and that's why I brought it up. So, in case someone else like me who happened to be listening to this was also hearing it, they could probably try and grasp around it. But having now kind of gotten an idea of it, it is an interesting topic, and I think it's something that would be worth talking about again. Is what would be sort of the lines that need to be drawn, and we've already touched over some of that. So now, just for the whole topic, I think we can go ahead and start wrapping this discussion up. So I just wanted to go ahead and have some of you guys have a chance just to get some of your final thoughts on any of the particular topics that we've covered or discussions, and if you have any kind of like any last regards on some of this. So I'm going to go ahead and give it back to Ali to start us off. Ali, you want to go ahead and keep going?
I don't know really where to start here, because I mean the whole conversation about the call-out culture for me is kind of one of those things where I don't know. It just feels like you kind of have to balance it out. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Well, definitely. They have to stop being so one-sided. When it like what I said with how in the past year they've done character assassinations of that one guy whose name I can never even remember, and Bill Cosby. Yet when something similar happens to with a woman as the one who committed the act, it's absolutely they just completely glaze over it and they don't say a thing about it. A man, but if a man's in that position, character assassination, they destroy his life. That the first guy, it came out of it was leaked out of confidential therapy sessions that he had. May or may not have molested a teenager. What happened to him? He was all set to end up filming for Ted 2, which is a Seth MacFarlane movie in the works. He got fired from that. Seventh Heaven, as far as I know, is out of syndication on cable. And
actually,
so on and so.
They put it. They actually, I mean, because it was syndication on Netflix, but I think they kind of put it back after a while because I think since the other actors practically stated it's like don't like kind of screw us out of our revenue because of that guy's mistake.
So yeah, they just instead of being logical, they just kind of try to erase the guy from existence.
Well, law was also broken if it was leaked from private therapy sessions.
Not necessarily. I mean,
in those therapy sessions, it's patient doctor confidentiality.
No, actually, doctor-patient confidentiality can be broken in the event that there is probable cause that someone is being harmed or going to be harmed.
But it wasn't the doctor that did it.
Hang on, one at a time.
It wasn't the doctor that did it. It wasn't the doctor that leaked it, as far as I know. It was the wife.
With the proper authorities, not the media. That's when you can break doctor-patient confidentiality, and only when there's an imminent threat.
Hey, folks, this is an interesting discussion, but it has nothing to do with Gamergate and only very little to do with call culture. So I just wanted to kind of get back onto the topic at hand, and if you guys want, we can continue to talk about this particular issue off record.
Anyway, my point was they go and they completely have character assassinated two guys for being in questionable situations with women. Yet when a female celebrity admits openly in their autobiographical memoirs to things that are of the same sort of nature. She's just like, everybody's just like, she was it's fine. She was curious and all this. But even then, look at all the stuff that's happened with male children these days. Oh, he's horrible for having kissed a girl on the cheek because he likes her. What? No. It's complete. When it comes to call-out culture, it's completely one-sided against men.
There is a double standard.
There's a double standard that these AGG like to espouse. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at. Like we try and call out, say, Nyberg on something. It's a terrible thing, but they can call us out on just about anything they damn well please. And that's when I think it starts to become really problematic. It's like, okay, so we can't say anything negative about you, but you can go ahead and thrash us around all you damn well please.
She used the P word.
That's the
Yeah,
definition
she did
of
use the word
hypocrisy.
problematic. You have to be burned at the stake now, Allie. I'm sorry.
God damn it.
So
Come on, you guys were using vitriol earlier, and I didn't say shit about it.
is that a word that they use, Sue?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, all the time.
Actually, funny enough, I was at the doctor's office and they were using the word problematic. So, I think it's just one of those words that it gets used, but unfortunately has been taken over by a certain internet group of people. But
triggered and
Well, I think-
the overuse of triggered by SJWs irritates the hell out of me.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say that now.
But yeah, we're going to back to the topic. Okay, and preferably just any of the discussions that we've had. Well, I want to bring this towards an end. So if you guys have any last thoughts, Shrekbane, I'm going to go ahead and give it to you now. Go ahead.
I just want to, basically, I'm thinking in regards to all of that. I think the problem is that we shouldn't be engaging in character assassination. Period. We should be better than our opposition, because only then we have the moral high ground. Quite frankly, as long as we engage in the very same behavior that we criticize, whether or not we think it's justified or unfair, right? We're kind of being a little bit hypocritical there, right? And quite frankly, that stuff that's going on with, some of our vocal critics and how they're being, ridiculed is pretty damn close to call-out culture. That is something that, I'm not that comfortable with, because it really does not reflect well on us. And that's why I'm saying, if we focus more on actions than on individual people, that solves that problem by default, because we're moving away from character assassination and we're going more into the direction of criticizing behavior.
Well, frankly, not talking to Anita Sarkeesian directly also goes a long way to solving the problem. Just pointing that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely see that.
So Lee, with the whole topics that we've covered, is there anything else that you wanted to get your last thoughts out there on?
Actually, my last thoughts were more like just general, and that's just basically just basically what it is just being cool and not being not being goddamn shitbirds, about like everything. So, well, they were like, it's more like if there's something if there's something going on, or if there's something going on, or something in opposition to something that's something that's a bit I don't know, disturbing. I guess either just kind of relax, research the crap first before jumping the gun.
I'll get KOP to confirm it first.
KOP could confirm it for everybody. Yeah. Ali, you had something you wanted to add in? I see you trying to say something.
Oh, I just want us agreeing that we shouldn't really jump the gun as much as we are.
Okay. Now, Nick, with all the topics that we covered, did you have anything else you wanted to get your last thoughts on?
I've said my 2 cents.
Okay.
Go ahead and get somebody else.
All right, and Shinjo, you have the last word. So, anything else that you wanted to touch up on within all the different topics that we've kind of covered with this entire topic of discussion on Gamergate being harmful and everything that has transpired in the discussion?
I've said pretty much all I can say, other than the fact that Choky Chicken is people. It's people.
Rock with my life reference.
All right, well, folks, this has been a very interesting discussion, and I would be more than happy to do this again with all of you guys.
Well, all right.
yeah.
This is actually
yeah.
rather perfect timing because I'm about to hit the save station too.
Perfect. All right, well, that's it.
Thank